Okay, the show is live. We had I think what was a false start this morning. And I'm just double checking now to see how we're looking here. One moment. I had mic difficulties to see how we're looking. It looks like we're good now. I had to actually listen in because I'm on my own today. This is Chris Gomez here on the Dev Talk Show. Rich Ross can't be here today, although we might see him in chat. So, if you were here just a few minutes ago and you saw the opening that didn't work out so well, apologies for that. Some technical difficulties trying to get this going, but we have what I think is a pretty exciting show. A lot of folks are trying to use Blazor in .NET 8, and when you are looking to add authentication to your application in .NET 8, we have just one option in the templates. The option is you can either just have none and have no code added to your project for authentication and authorization, or you can pick individual accounts. And the individual accounts template that you get is very full featured. You will get a individual login so that somebody can register at your site, provide a username, provide a password, and that gets stored into a database managed by Entity Framework Core. And then you can add external accounts. And the external accounts, you get a component built in called the external login picker that sees every external account that you've registered and puts a button up for you. So it all just sort of works, right? And then a lot of people, including myself, start to ask, well, wait a second, how do I customize this? How maybe I don't want all these things. And one situation that occurs to me quite often is using Blazor for internal applications at work using your work's Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory. A lot of folks, I think, we're used to this scenario where we want to make an internal application and we want to share it. We want our internal users to use it, and it should just work. Everything should just work, right? Perhaps roles and permissions can be managed in the Entra ID. Like I said, managed. Somebody who has a certain role can use the app, and other people who don't maybe can't use the app, right? So the first problem that you're going to run into is just how do I get Entra ID for my work tenant working in Blazor? And it's my belief that this has a couple unique pieces that you don't find when you're doing external auth, for example, with Google. And I think the main one is that Entra ID, like I said, for folks that are just joining, they used to be known as Azure Active Directory. Entra ID has two OAuth endpoints. There's the common endpoint, which I think most people try out working, and then you get it blows up, and you say, I don't understand what's going on. And then when it blows up, you might just give up because you can't figure out that there's actually, you get exposed a single-tenant endpoint that's designed just for your app. So we're going to take a look at that right now. And the way we're going to do that is, I know that the title of this, we're going to move pretty quickly today. The title of this is From Scratch. But I recognize that not everybody watching this video has been following along with all of our authentication from scratch content for Blazor. So we're actually going to first do this through a template and then try to get this done very quickly so that we can move on to building it from scratch. So here, let's get my screen shared here. Here we go. All right, so here this happens to be Visual Studio 2022 Enterprise. You don't necessarily need Enterprise. This will all work fine in Professional or Community if you're using the Community version, which is free and basically is a license of Professional. It's a community license, but you get all the features of Professional. That's the way I should say that. And this all works just fine with .NET New Blazor. You're just going to use the feature for individual accounts. That's what we're going to do here real quick. And I know I said this is from scratch. We will do this from scratch. So this is Blazor. Let's switch to where this is Blazor Entra ID. That's what I'm going to call it. And let's say we want .NET 8. We're going to say individual accounts so that we get all of that template code created for us. We're going to leave interactive render mode as none today. I think that we are getting very close to wanting to have shows about client side and auto. If you've been watching us for a while, we have been sticking to server side. And I think my reasoning for that has always been that server side rendering is now the foundation for Blazor. In my opinion, it is the base layer. That has been frustrating for people. And we do have talked about how the issues of pre-rendering and how the issues of seemingly that flickering feel, that can be mitigated a little bit by stream rendering. But I firmly believe that server side is the foundation of Blazor, and then you as the developer make the choice whether you want to be more or less interactive. If you need a fully client side WebAssembly based application, you don't necessarily want to choose the Blazor web project. You want to choose the Blazor WebAssembly standalone app project. That's my opinion, because you have made the conscious choice that for whatever reason you need that. So here we are in Blazor Entra ID. If I do nothing more than run this, it, then sometimes the Blazor project appears somewhere else, and it appeared off screen. So let's bring it over. You get a new application. If you haven't seen this before, we have a page that auth is required. This is all coming from the template. Auth is required to reach this page. So therefore, if I click on it, I get redirected to the login page. See how I was redirected? I can look up in the URL. If I look up in the URL here, I'm not doing that right. What I was hoping to draw there. So once I'm zoomed in, I should be able to click. There we go. And the important part is I was redirected to the login, right? So I'm not on this auth required page. I can register a new user account here. I would really come here. I would really come to register as a new user. And then it goes through this whole process of sending an email. But I want to make an application for work, right? And my application for work is I don't want to create a whole other username and login. That's not how I want it to work. I want them to just say like log in with Microsoft, and it just says like, oh, okay, well, you're at work. So let's just use that. Now, what they do is very helpfully, you get redirected to an article on external provider authentication. And you can see that on the left-hand side here, we are here in the overview, and you can go down to Microsoft Authentication, and you get directions for setting up a Microsoft external login with ASP.NET Core. Now, we will be able to follow a lot of this, but there will be a point where we will diverge for a work setting, okay? So let's go ahead, and it says here that you need, first of all, you need the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Microsoft Account NuGet package. And that's all. That is still correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the app, and we're going to do this all through the GUI. You don't have to do it through the GUI. In fact, I even believe in their instructions, they do not. I didn't mean to close that. Did I foolishly close that article? Oh, I may have. Okay, so I'll just reopen it in a second. So I'm going to say ASP.NET Core Authentication, Microsoft account. Oh, it looks like I've searched for this before. And I want to browse, not installed. Here it is. Here's the package that I want. Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Microsoft account. So I'm going to install that. And that should be done. So we could head back to Program CS. Let's run this again so that I can quickly find my way back to that page that you know why I think it closed is because when you close in Visual Studio, when your app ends, the browser window is closed. And I wanted to hang on to this. So let's go ahead and go to the browser window that I have open. Happens to be pointing to the Azure portal, which we're going to use in just a second. And so we get to keep this open. They talk about how, I haven't applied any of these migrations yet, so we'll see. They talk about how, okay, you need to add Microsoft account. And this is correct, right? You need a client ID and a client secret in order to do this. So let's head over to the portal. This is where doing this from scratch might have been a little bit more beneficial. We're going to find out. Okay, so if you're not used to the Azure portal, I happen to be in the Azure portal, and I'm sitting. Let's just go to my plain old dashboard where this might be where you log in. You can set your dashboard up however you want. You can see mine's a little customized. If I click in the portal menu, I go down to Microsoft Entra ID. If you haven't been here in a while, you may be used to this saying Azure Active Directory. It's the same thing. You even get a little bit of help right here. Azure Active Directory is now. I'm really kind of disappointed that I'm having trouble drawing there, right? I think that's weird that when I should be able to, I know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so it's now Microsoft Entra ID. Okay, so what I need is a client ID and a client secret, but that's not anywhere on this page. What I need is an enterprise application. And let me just double check that we're on the same page with what they're saying. Microsoft Authentication. And it does say that you can go to app registrations. I may not really need it to be an enterprise auth, an enterprise app. So let's go to app registrations. We're going to be able to do a whole show on the difference between app registrations and enterprise applications and how they're related to one another. So app registrations, as you can see here, I'm using a tool called Azure Mask, which is blocking client IDs. Let's create a new registration. And when it says the user-facing display name for this application, that's what people are going to see when you're giving permission to use this. So we're going to say this is Blazor Entra ID. We're just going to call it that. And here's where I'm going to diverge a little bit. The articles will tell you could set it to be personal Microsoft accounts, or this other article. Let's double check what the article says. It says the Microsoft account package supports app registrations created using accounts in any organizational directory or accounts in any organizational directory and Microsoft accounts. Okay. So they'll say that you could click this one and accept personal Microsoft accounts. That's one way that you could accept external users. But I actually kind of just want it to be only users that are in this organization, right? Because my vision is this is an app that might be used by people at work. And people at work, you might be using, maybe you're using the whole Microsoft stack at work for your users. People have Outlook. People, maybe you use SharePoint. I don't know. And so everybody already has Microsoft accounts. There are Microsoft organizational accounts that might even be your username and your company name, something at your company name.com. But so I want single tenant. That's what I want. So I'm going to register, and that's it. What happens is a bunch of stuff that we need appears. I have my new app registration, Blazor Entra ID, and Azure Mask did not mask this. Do I have the mask on? I do. It does not mask it, but we're going to need the client ID. Okay. It says application ID, and in parentheses, it says client. So I'm going to need this ID. So what I'm going to do is I have a page off to the side where I'm copying this ID out because I need to set this as a client secret, which I will show you as a user secret in my application. I'll show you how to do that. There's more that I have to do, though. I think the next thing I got to do, let's just double check that I'm not missing it. Yes, we have to add a redirect URI, and we have to create a client secret. So what's the purpose of the redirect URI? When you use external authentication, what's really happening is your application is calling out to a well-known endpoint provided by Google, Twitter, Microsoft, Facebook, whoever, that says, hey, why don't you double check that this person using this browser is logged in to your organization, and if they aren't, then can you log them in and send me back information about them, essentially send me back claims information so that I can figure out who they are and I can authorize them appropriately. So the authentication is happening by the external provider. The authorization is always controlled by your application. You are always in charge of authorization. Okay. So why did I come back to Visual Studio? Because in order to test this locally, you are going to need to provide a redirect URL. Okay. And the redirect URL is based in part on this thing right here, the URL that your app is running at locally. Every time you create an app, whether it's in VS Code, whether you do it in Writer, whether you do it in Visual Studio, you're going to be assigned a port to use. And depending on what combination of IDE and whether you're using launch settings or whether you're using IIS Express or there, I found that all these different permutations might put you in a place where everybody who fires the app up is going to be on the same port. This is most common when you're doing a .NET new and then doing everything from the command line in Visual Studio Code. Or you pull the app down from your central source control and you run it and you're on 7222, but your teammate is on 7117, and who knows why? Well, because Visual Studio is assigning a port each time differently when you bring the app down. Can you override that? Yes, you can. For one, you could put in a launch settings JSON into your project and now it'll be consistent. But we're not going to do that. And the reason I'm not going to do it is I feel like this is the experience a lot of you just may have if you just try to do this in Visual Studio. So HTTPS localhost 7222. Let's head back to the portal. And in the portal, I need, let's see, I need to go to authentication. Maybe I'm wrong. This is the part that I always forget is exactly what to do next. So let's go to Microsoft. Let's see, where does it say? Let's look at redirect URI, new registration, authorization. Under, you know what? Maybe I don't think I'm stuck with this. Select register. That's interesting. That let's see, branding and properties, overview. Add a redirect URI. Okay, so I did not add a redirect URI as I was creating this registration. If the option was there, my brain missed it. I wasn't paying attention to the docs. So here I am on the overview page for my app registration, Blazor Entra ID, and it's still here. I'm not sunk. Add a redirect URI. Okay, so I'm going to click there to add it. And I want to say that who can use this application? Accounts in this organizational directory only, because I'm going to use this at work. And so what I need is add a platform. That's what it is. I want to say add a platform. And you get this different, this kind of a wizard that is saying, well, what kind of app are you building? Because what it's trying to figure out is what you need. Do you need a redirect URI? Do you need a secret? Like, what is it you need? Well, I'm hosting and deploying a web server application. So I get this configure web and it says, so what's your redirect URI? And this is required. So the redirect URI is, I said it was 7222, right? So this is close. This is close because I've been in here before. So clearly it is trying to help me. I want 7222 sign in -Microsoft. Okay. Why sign in -Microsoft? Well, let's go back to the instructions. The short answer is the instructions say to use sign in -Microsoft, right? Sign in -Microsoft is appended. Why sign in -Microsoft? The reason why is because this package, this authentication package that we have pulled from NuGet, will automatically handle requests that come back to your app at sign in -Microsoft. If you use the Google package, they've already set it up to be sign in -Google. And as you go down the different pages here, like if I go to Google, we're going to see the same thing. Sign in Google, right? Just like it says there. And if I go to Twitter, it's going to say something else. This is not a function of your external auth provider. This is your NuGet package that you're getting that says, listen, I'm just going to put an endpoint in and I'm going to be ready to handle the redirection from the auth provider. I already know how to call the auth provider. I'll take care of that for you. and I'm going to handle that redirection. But we have to tell this app registration what that means, and that's what this is all about. Okay, that's what we've done here. And 7222, you saw that I went and dug that port out just by running the app. If you get sick of it changing every time, this is where you will go and investigate something like a launch settings JSON for your Visual Studio, or maybe in VS Code, same thing, in Writer, so that you can keep the port the same and only have to put this registration in. Or what you really might do is you might have your own registration just for testing and keep that separate from your prod registration. And when I say registration, I'm referring to Azure app registrations. I don't need to touch anything else here. I certainly do not want implicit grant. I don't need a hybrid flow. And while in a future show, it will be important to handle logout, that's something that we only need for like a single sign-on, single sign-out scenario, which is very useful, but not necessary today. So let's click configure, and that's done. So they will accept this destination when returning authentication responses. Great. Now we need one more thing. We need a client secret. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to create a client secret that I'm going to be able to put into my secrets.json. I'm going to have to give it a quick description, which we're going to say is Blazor Entra ID secret. We'll call it login app secret, something like that. They say it expires. I'm going to make it expire quickly because, quite frankly, this is just in case I forget. Now we'll say 30 days. Just in case I forget to delete it, because my intention is not to hang on to this. Now, as you can see, Azure Mask hid it from view, but when you get to this screen and you wonder which one is the secret, it is this one here under value. This GUID is a secret ID. So this GUID is just an ID of the secret, which might seem strange, but what do you need an ID of the secret for? If you wanted to delete this secret and you didn't want to go to the portal, because as I often say on the show, friends don't let friends use the portal. You wanted to automate this process. And so maybe you want to delete the secret. Well, you're going to need a way to delete it, but it's a secret. So how do you delete it? Well, you use its identification. So I'm going to click on the copy to clipboard. I'm going to head over off screen from you and save this client secret. Okay, so I've got it saved. I can now enter it into the app. All right. This is going along, but quite frankly, taking a little bit longer than I kind of wanted it to. So let's move on. What's the best way for me to deal with this in the application? Well, first of all, I'm in Program CS now. I'm already getting a default scheme and default sign scheme. That's fine. I don't need to worry about any of that. Entity framework got set up. All this stuff got set up. And we're going to try to bypass all that in a little bit. But what I'm going to do is we're going to add on to this train of service building. Google Copilot's trying to help me out here. And I'm going to say add Microsoft account. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and tab and let's see what Copilot thought. Oh, not what I wanted. Let's do that again. Add Microsoft account. And I'm just going to leave that alone for now. So the complaint that I should be getting here is why. That's interesting. Why? I did add that package, didn't I? Let's double check. I did add this package. Okay, so this should be fine. What am I doing wrong here? Add authentication, add identity cookies, add Microsoft account, default. Oh, you know what? I do actually know what the problem is. Add identity cookies does not return. See, it returns an identity cookies builder. So here's a little gotcha. It returns an identity cookies builder. So if I want to layer on top of it, the problem with that is that that's not the same as returning an authentication builder, which add authentication adds. I kind of don't want to disturb this pattern. So I can say builder.services.add Microsoft account. And if I can't, then I'll just move it ahead. Yeah, I think the problem is the extension method the extension method must be expecting an authentication builder. So we're going to put it here. See, I learned something by not doing this from scratch, because I have not tried to do this any other way but from scratch before. So great, perfect. That'll all work fine. Now, the code that Copilot gave us said, let's the code that Copilot gave us was client ID, client secret. Let's answer a quick question here. We got a great question from Zig. Can you make a video with OpenID, Dict, and Blazor? I have to get a little bit more information about that, because what I wonder if you're asking is OpenID in general, or because in some ways this is based on that, but that's okay. We'll definitely get back to making sure we do that in the future time. So client ID and client secret, this all sounds great. Everything looks like it's going fine, right? You may have already done this before, where you have added a client ID and a client secret. This may be something you're already used to doing. How should I do this? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to pick manage user secrets. You don't have to use Visual Studio to get user secrets. You can also use Visual Studio Code. It works fine. And what I'm going to do is I am going to start putting these secrets in, but I will be leaving this in order to actually paste them in. Okay. So let's see. Authentication was the first layer, and then Microsoft, I think, was the second layer. And then after that, I think that it was client ID. Yep. And let's just put in some garbage here for now. And then after that, it was client secret, and we'll just allow that. And let me go double check. So the layering is authentication, Microsoft client ID, and then also Microsoft client secret. Let's go back and look. Authentication, Microsoft client ID. So see how this colon is a flattening of the hierarchical nature of JSON? That's because not all configuration has to come from JSON. It could come from command line. It could come from environment variables that do not have a hierarchical structure. This is how configuration lets you address a hierarchical structure. So I'm going to do that here, except that this client ID and client secret is going to get us nowhere. This is a good start, but it's going to get us nowhere. So I'm going to take this secrets JSON off screen, and I'm going to paste in. You all saw the client ID from earlier, but what you did not see is the client secret. So if you were following along earlier, or if you're following along in the future and you paused the video and you said, hey, I've got my client secret saved off screen, then definitely paste those values in. I am now closing that document. That document's closed, and these values are saved. We're getting a little bit of a warning that what to do if it's a null reference, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay. I think that does it. Let's go ahead and run this, okay? Because through the magic of the Blazor template, it's going to detect that you added an external account. When it detects that, and this is why we're going to do this from scratch in just a little bit. When it detects that, it adds a button for you. Adds a button, Microsoft button. You click on it, and it blows up. And that's where you look at the documentation and say, hold on, what went wrong? The client does not exist or is not enabled for consumers. If you are the application developer, configure a new application through the app registrations in the Azure portal. Unauthorized client. That can really be frustrating because you're not sure what the problem is. And the problem should be that we didn't say we were accepting external Microsoft personal accounts. And I'm already logged in with a personal account, right? So let's try that again. The one thing I am a little concerned about is why it says the app isn't configured or wasn't found. That I think is weird because we just saw it there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to open it in a private window. Okay, private window. And let's go to login. So I'm not logged into anything now. And when I click use Microsoft, it says, well, sign in. But what do I sign in as? I need to sign in as somebody who works here. So let's head back to the app registration. And who works at this place? How am I going to find that out? So what I can do is I can head back. I'm going to head back all the way back to the Entra ID. Okay. There are users assigned to this Entra ID, to this directory. If I click on users, you're going to see I already have them set up. I did actually assign my own Microsoft account, but I also created 2 other users. One of them is called test user at spaceshot.net. Another is called example user at spaceshot.net. And you might be wondering, how is it that you got to use your own custom domain instead of this long identity? That's going to have to wait for another show, but you can add domains and to your ID, to your Entra ID. You can add your own domain, and you can basically let Entra ID know. You can prove to it you're the owner and let it say, okay, fine, I will allow you to manage the users in there. Okay. So now that I've done that, let me stop sharing for just a second, because what I did not bring up before this all started is I have those user IDs and passwords saved. And that was the one piece. There it is. All set. I just wanted to make sure that it came off screen. And so now let's present again. Let's get our screen back up here. Sorry about that little detour. I am going to now try to log in as example user at spaceshot.net. Okay. So let's type in example user. When you create your own user there, you can basically supply the password, and then you can say you got to change it the next time. You can do all of the things that somebody who administers an Entra ID already is familiar with that. So it's going to say, well, what's your password? And I do have that. Let me get that pasted in. Oh, I picked the wrong one. Sorry about that. This might be a situation where I have to, So I haven't used this user before. And so it said, well, hold on. I created this user and then I didn't actually use the user. So it's saying, hold on, this is, you need to change this password here. So I'm getting that saved for myself right now. And we're putting in the current password. See how this is all handled for you, though? Kind of nice, right? The Microsoft stuff's handling for you. So I expect to sign in. I expect to, this particular organization says that you got to use the Authenticator app, but I don't have to do it for 14 days. So I'm going to go ahead and say next. And I'm still expecting, I was hoping not to have to do this. I thought, you know what this might be? This might be a default in the template. It might be a default in the template, because I really want to move on from this, right? HTTP as local. Not okay. So interestingly enough, this may just drive me to move on to the template more quickly, because because I must have something in my organization that requires that. Or it actually could be in the template, because I'm sitting here saying, like, I don't remember this being in part of my organization. Like, I've signed in with these accounts before. Let me try one more time with the other user. I'm going to try one more time with the other user. Let's say Microsoft. Let's say unable to complete your request, of course, because I'm logged in. So I goofed there. I need an in private window. And I'm going to say HTTPS localhost 7222. We're going to say login. We're going to say Microsoft. I have another user. That other user I talked about is test user at example.com. And this is a work or school account. Take you to your organization's sign in page, and then it doesn't work, right? It blows up. This is what I was expecting. This blows up. The reason why this blows up is because the default in this package, this Microsoft authentication package, is to use what's called the common endpoint, the common Microsoft authentication endpoint. But that's not what we can use here. We need to use, let's go to Entra ID and pick here I am in the overview, but I need to go find the app registration. And did I not complete the app registration? Where is it? Oh, here it is. This is the one we made today. Yes, Blazor Entra ID. So even though I created a new app registration, notice how it is now under enterprise applications. I come here. Let's see. What am I looking for? I didn't think it was in properties. There is an endpoints section. What I'm surprised about, and this could be the thing, is remember how it complained that this app registration didn't exist? Because what I am expecting to find here is I'm expecting to find this endpoints, right? So I may have to register this app again. I'm expecting to find endpoints. I want to click on endpoints. And then you see how you get all these auth endpoints? These are tenant specific. So I actually need this endpoint. Now the tenant ID was already kind of showing earlier. So I don't know what to make of that. I don't know whether I should be concerned about it. I need the authorization and the token endpoint to be added to this application. So I can get them from here. I want to show you what it looks like real quick. So let me copy one. I'm going to take out the tenant ID, although the tenant ID showed up on another page already in this stream. So I'm going to take out the tenant ID, and then I'm just going to show you what it looks like. Let's say, let's just open Visual Studio Code, and let's get a brand new file in here. So new text file, that's what it looks like. This is the tenant ID though. It's a GUID. That will log into your own tenant on Entra ID. So we need to now configure the application for that. I'm hoping this is not all for naught in the template and that we have to rush over to on how we have, and we're going to have to rush over to the from scratch option, because that's where I really want to land today before this is over. And so I appreciate this comment from Zig, and I love how you go through the process that depicts the real life scenario. Thank you very much for that comment. And I will tell you that Rich and I, that is one of our mission statements for the show. I appreciate that you picked up on that, and I love it, and I'm flattered that you have. Thank you so much. That is one of our points of the show, is we believe that too many times documentation or videos or tutorials make too many assumptions about what you know. And so I go through the process myself, and I run into all the problems, and I say, I don't know what to do next. And then I figure it out, or maybe I get lucky, or I find a blog post, or I watch a video. And we always try to give props to people who help us through, whether it's a video or a blog post. But in this case, this was a lot of self-discovery. And we need to add more to this. We need to declare the token endpoint and the auth endpoint. And we need to basically say, hey, come over to our tenant for this. Okay. So there's a right way to do this. And what I'm going to do though is I'm going to say Microsoft options, and watch this. There's a lot of options in here that we don't even think about when we use these providers. There's all kinds of stuff in here. One of the things that's in here is authorization endpoint. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and take Copilot suggestion, even though it's wrong for now, because it just helped me. And that's great too. It helps me write the code. The code's in, but that's not the endpoint I want to use. Because I'm doing a single tenant situation to use at work, I need this authorization endpoint, this V2, which I can copy to clipboard, and I can pick the token endpoint. I can copy to clipboard. So once again, you can rewind if you need to find it in app registrations, spaceshot.net, app registrations. That's the name of my Entra ID. So I go to Entra ID. I go to app registrations, endpoints, and here they are. Here's all the endpoints. There's endpoints for other stuff too, but these are the ones that I'm concerned with right now. I want authorization endpoint, token endpoint, and I need to paste these in. So here's what I'm going to do. Just because I think these are meant to be secrets, I'm going to go ahead and add them to the secrets JSON. Remember that hierarchy I created earlier? Well, all I got to do is hopefully not spell anything wrong as I'm typing this stuff in. I'm going to now have to go over to secrets.json and add two new I'm going to add two new features. And because that's going to pop up on my screen, let me just very quickly say manage user secrets. I'm doing this out of view. So if people are wondering why isn't he showing his screen? Let's just get through this real quick. Authorization endpoint. Okay. So I've got one in, and then token endpoint, and then I've got that in. I need to copy them in. We could see we're joined today by the dog. I am now going to the portal, copying that into user secrets, back to the portal, copying the token into user secrets. Almost there. Save that, close it. Let's get the screen shared again. Let's get back here to where we're showing what we're doing. Okay, perfect. Oh, looks like I'm up in the upper right-hand corner now. That's fine. So now that I've done that, my hope is that I can log in. If I can't, then it could be because of that multi-factor auth wanting to be set up. And if that's the case, then we'll have to move on, because I think what a lot of you might be here to see is the from scratch implementation. Okay. So I want this here. This is in private window, so that when I try to log in, I can log in with this other Microsoft user. And that Microsoft user was test user at spaceshot.net. And let's get the password for them in there. And permissions required. So this application is not published by Microsoft. This is a good thing. This is basically letting you, the user, understand, if I were doing this correctly, I would probably put the logo of my business here. I would probably fill out that Blazor Entra ID to be much clearer. I would provide app info. And then as a security compliance organization, I would probably send out to our users, hey, this is expected. You should expect for Microsoft to ask you this. So I'm going to go ahead and say accept. And let's see. Don't ask me for the two-factor auth, please. Because I was not anticipating that in following the template. It's thinking about it for a lot longer than I thought. Oh, okay. So what I did not do is I did not apply the entity framework migrations that come with the template. You do not have to do this if you build this from scratch. But so let's go ahead and apply those migrations. We apply the migration. And what it's really doing is it's really creating a local database. And you know, it's not that I really think that's bad, but it worked. It worked. I do not have a problem with the templates. The reason why this channel worked a lot on from scratch is because people might not want all these things. So it worked. I am logged in with a single tenant Microsoft account. You've successfully authenticated with Microsoft. This particular template asks you to enter an email address so that they can store that. And then they might be able to, they connect it to your account. So now they know about your Microsoft account in the template. And then they also have an email address, which is useful because, and then you're going to get an email confirmation, but they simulate that. So I say, click here. Thank you for confirming your email. And if I now go to home, that works. If I go to auth required, oh, it says, well, now you got to log in again. So let me click Microsoft. I'm authenticated. Perfect. Hello, test user at spaceshot.net. That's everything we were looking for. And if I click on this little person, I can change profile settings. I can add a phone number. I can add all kinds of stuff. I can add whether I want two-factor auth. What do I want personal data deleted? This is all cool stuff. And I do encourage you to look at the templates to think about what you want to bring into your own apps. But what if you're saying something like this? I don't want local accounts to log in. I don't need all this. I don't need to support multiple services. I just want to support one. I just want to support my service. So let's take a look at how that is done. There's two parts to this episode today. One of them is, how do you use Microsoft accounts in a single tenant scenario? And what may have been tripping you up, and please let me know in the comments, is this what you were running into? Is that you read this particular document right here, Microsoft account external login setup with ASP.NET Core. And this document says, it's telling you, this sample shows you how to enable users to sign in with their work, school, or personal Microsoft account. The or is very important. The or personal Microsoft accounts is the reason why you don't have to, when you follow this example, you don't have to set the authorization or token endpoint, because by default, this Microsoft account package from NuGet will use what's called the common endpoint. And the common endpoint must be used when you are signing in people using personal Microsoft accounts. The account you might use for your Office 365 subscription at home, or maybe you're an Xbox user, or whatever. Maybe you have a Hotmail account. I don't know. If you want to sign those users in, you don't need to change this. But I only wanted to limit it to my single tenant work only users. So now I have to provide my single tenant work only authentication and token endpoints. And also, I can't follow these directions exactly as written, because these directions said, it says here, the package supports both, but I did not pick this one. I did not pick accounts in any organizational directory, and I did not pick accounts in any organizational directory and Microsoft accounts. If we recall, I picked this tenant only because I wanted to limit it to the people that I work with. Okay. So this is the magic that you might have been missing to do single tenant authentication with Microsoft accounts. But how do you do this from scratch? So we have an application here that we've been promoting on the show called Blazor Auth from Scratch. And Blazor Auth from Scratch has some differences. And to try and keep this, first of all, our program CS is much shorter. It's much smaller. And there's a good reason for why it is much shorter and much smaller. The reason is that we did the same file new project, but we did not pick an authentication option. We left it at none. So we're not seeing, let me show you some of the code that we're not seeing, just in case you're not familiar. Oh, I closed it. Well, let's open it back up. Blazor Entra ID. Okay. We are not seeing, this is not here. Options, default scheme, and default sign-in scheme. The identity cookies are not added. The connection string, the DB context, the database developer, identity core, all of this is not added. The email sender is not in there. The migrations are not in there. And map additional identity endpoints is not in there. This is some code that they provide you that basically, it says right here, it adds the identity, it adds endpoints using minimal APIs. It adds endpoints that the identity components need in order to function. That's a ton of stuff that you get in your project that you might be looking at and saying, what is all this? What is all this? What do I do with all this? What do I do with all of this? This just got all added in the account section of my project. So in Blazor Auth from Scratch, we have been rebuilding this from scratch. And so we added authorization and authentication, but to try and keep things a little bit I guess I wanted less magic. So we added our own authentication scheme called TDS cookie. Now, all an authentication scheme is just a string that you provide that tells these APIs, go do this with this cookie. Okay. So we have now added a cookie called the TDTS cookie, and we have made it the default authentication scheme. That seems really confusing at first, I'm sure. I'm sure at first it's like, gosh, I don't understand. This is now the default sign-in scheme. So what you're going to see is in the rest of this, we are referring to TDTS cookie, which stands for the Dev Talk Show. DDTS cookie, we are referring to this to say, hold on, sign in the user for this auth scheme. Sign in the user, sign out the user for this auth scheme. In our sample application, we added Google, but we also added Microsoft account. And I did it a little bit differently. This is slightly different code. If you want to pause the video and compare what we did before, where we specified every configuration correctly, not correctly, individually, you can use the get section method in builder.configuration, and you can just tell it to go into the JSON and say, just grab that whole section in the hierarchy and map it to the individual points here. So it's going and grabbing client ID. It's grabbing client ID and it's saying, okay, let me map client ID to client ID. And I'll map client secret to client secret. I will add token to token. I can't really show you that in the secrets, I don't think, because there's secrets in there, although I may have disabled those secrets. In fact, that could be something interesting. This could blow up because I think the last time we did this show, I accidentally showed the secrets JSON. And so those values were valid still. And I think they might not be anymore. So there is one other thing we did. You might be wondering, what is map identity endpoints? That's our own code. So how does this work? The way this works is we have created on our home page. Let's go to our home page. We have our own home page, and we have our own component called the big account status component. This is a Blazor component that we created. And, you know, I don't know that there's too many steps to go through this. We might be able to go through it quickly, but I don't know. So this uses the authorized view and the not authorized view. What it's doing is it's saying, if you're authorized to use this application, then we're going to show you, we're going to say, hey, you're authorized, you're logged in. And then we're going to run a little bit of code to find out what authentication type came in. Were you Google? Well, then we're going to say you logged in from Google, and we're even going to show your user picture. Are you TDTS, meaning that it was logged in from our internal user management? Then we're going to show that. If you're from Microsoft, we're going to say you logged in from a Microsoft account. And then we don't expect to ever get here. We don't think that you should ever get to the default part of the switch. So if you do, then we don't know how you got in here. If you're not authorized, then instead we show another component called the login component. And then we also show this component called the logout component. They're named kind of funny. My own logout and my own login. They're named kind of funny because I wanted to make it clear to everybody that we were using our own components here. Okay. If you are not authorized, we also show the Google external login and the Microsoft external login. All right. So there's a lot to see. What does that look like? It might be easier to take a quick peek at running. So let's go ahead and run it, and we'll get an idea of the home page and what that looks like. And here we go. Just like we saw, there's 3 ways to log into this app. The My Own login does not require a password, which is not the way you want to do this, but it was to demonstrate that you can craft login however you want. Clearly, you want to have username and passwords, or maybe you don't. Maybe you want to have passwordless login where they put in their username and you go look up in a database their email address and you send that email address like a link, and that link comes back in. You have something saved, like it's called a nonce, and a nonce means a one-time use token. You have something in that link that's a one-time use token, comes back in, and it says, okay, let's authenticate them. That you're in control. You don't have to rely on traditional login methods. You could also implement auth0 or whatever you want. So, or Azure B2C, doesn't matter. Entra ID, right? If I say log in with your Google account, I happen to be logged in as the Dev Talk Show right now. I think this is going to work. Nope, didn't work. And I think the reason why, oh no, it did work. The callback didn't work correctly though. That's too bad. We'll have to figure out what the callback didn't work. However, it does say, welcome to your new app. You're authorized. You're logged in as a Dev Talk Show. You're logged in from Google. It's even showing the account picture, and I can log out just by clicking log out. And that's it. If I'm logged out, I'm logged out. Every page knows whether I'm authorized or not because we put that big login component, we put it on every page. If I say login with Microsoft, it's going to let's see. I think, did it not work? Oh, it didn't work. I know why. Because it's not, yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, you don't exist in this tenant. So no. That's what happened there, is it tried to open, the TheDevTalkShow is not a tenant account. It's a personal account. So that didn't work. Okay. Let's go back to the code and see what else is going on here. Now, I have my own external login component, the Microsoft external login component. Let's see what the Microsoft external login component looks like. In order to log into Microsoft, what you really must do is you need to redirect over to their sign-in. You need to somehow get our package to do that. So the way that we do that is the Microsoft external login component does nothing more than expose a button. Remember that button that said login with Microsoft? Let's run this so you can see the button. Button says login with Microsoft. Okay, here it is. Login with Microsoft. We have to have an anti-forgery token. If you forget this, by the way, Blazor will let you know because it'll blow up and it'll say no anti-forgery token. So whenever you see that, when you're making your own forms in Blazor and it blows up on you, well, there you go. We are going to post. We're going to have this be a submit button. And when you click on it, we are going to post to account perform Microsoft login. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a hidden field with the return URL. And the return URL is going to use a Blazor component that we get that basically says, what's the current URI? That's what this is doing. Navigation manager.uri, what's the current URI? And that's all going to get sent over to account/perform Microsoft login. So you might be saying, well, if I open the account folder, where is it? Where's perform Microsoft login? Perform Microsoft login is a minimal API. So let's open the identity endpoint extensions. This is a class I wrote. Okay, this is from scratch. Account.mapPost. Perform Microsoft login. Okay, it's an asynchronous function. And remember that return URL that was a hidden field? Here it is. We are taking that out of the form. We are also saying, please provide me the HTTP context. So it's very important to remember that authentication always occurs on the client. I just said that completely wrong. Authentication always occurs on a server. You can't authenticate from a pure WebAssembly application because how does it talk to these external providers? We have a great comment here. I appreciate this so much. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry that I'm probably going to get the names of these wonderful places. Hi, everyone from Karachi, Pakistan. I am absolutely floored that we have a viewer from quite literally the other side of the world from me. This is the most humbling part of this. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we know the provider's name is Microsoft. The reason that's important is because that package, that NuGet package, registers itself as a provider. And so this built-in challenge result, this is built into the ASP.NET framework, is it goes ahead and does what's called a challenge out to OpenID, which is the Microsoft OpenID provider. When it does that challenge, it doesn't know anything about where to go. The NuGet package knows, and it's already registered as itself as the Microsoft provider. So I don't have to do anything more fancy than just pass the word Microsoft into this array. This particular method challenge wants an array of providers that you want to challenge against. I only have one. So I'm just going to say, well, make me an array of one with provider in it. I have to pass in authentication properties so that way that this provider, this NuGet package from Microsoft, it knows where to redirect to. It knows what to tell Microsoft to redirect to after we're done. And because I chose to include the current location as the return URL, I can just add that as an authentication property, which I need to pass into this method. This has to be passed in. I'm also going to do one thing really quick. I'm going to sign out anybody that might already be signed in, just in case somebody tries to hit this endpoint without using the UI. I want a clean cookie. I want my auth cookie to be clean. So I'm going to sign out of whatever's currently in there. That's a precaution. You could go a long time without ever worrying about that. But the fact of the matter is, somebody can always hit this endpoint, perform Microsoft login with a post method, and don't ever think that people aren't probing your website, checking your forms. They're essentially trying to hack your site. I promise you that there are scripts that are testing forms on your site, putting in values, hitting buttons, trying to see what happens. And then what happens is if the script detects something like, oh, this might be exploitable, then they let the person trying to hack your site know, and then they'll really go after it, look for SQL injections, stuff like that. So always think about the fact that endpoints aren't necessarily called just by you unless you have firewall restrictions or something. So this particular, by putting it in an account group, this is now going to resolve at account/perform Microsoft login. Let's go back to the Microsoft login component, which is right here. And the Microsoft external login component says, post this to account/perform Microsoft login. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and get this going. Let's go back to that login. I'm going to put a breakpoint here so we can watch all this happen. I think I can set a breakpoint here. Yes, that may not fire though. These breakpoints aren't going to fire. What if we did this? What if we put in just a little silly, this is going to be real silly. Let's put in some razor code that says if 1 equals 1, then let's spit out, let's just put in a p tag. The current URI is, that way we can all see that it comes out of the navigation manager. Okay. I think that code's going to fire, and I should be able to set a breakpoint here. Okay. Notice that I have to inject the navigation manager. The navigation manager is part of ASP.NET Core. Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Components.Navigation Manager. I have to inject this so that way this page can read out the current URI, and it's getting passed along with this anyway. That's just for demonstration purposes. All right. Let me open a new tab in that in private mode. And I need it to be 7222. Oh, no, actually, we're not 7222 in this app. We are 7130. By the way, the 1 equals 1 fired. So I'm going to hit F10. And here we are. Navigation Manager URI is going to get red. It's not showing it me here. But let's see when I bring up the app. Where's the app on the in private page? Here it is. The current URI. So we can read the URI. We can use that in our Blazor apps, right? We can use that. I don't need that breakpoint anymore, so it doesn't trip us up. It doesn't keep coming back. Here's the in private. Let's say login with Microsoft. String provider is Microsoft. Authentication properties are going to be to come back right to this very spot. Sign out anybody just in case someone signed in. And now let's go ahead and start that challenge. And when I start the challenge in the browser, this pops up and it says you need to sign in. And we've already done this before. We're going to use an account in our single tenant. Enter the password. Stay signed in. And look at this. You are logged in as test user. You logged in from a Microsoft account. Okay. I actually haven't shown you all the code that you need to make this happen, because we've seen that I had a big component. One big component that I could put on multiple pages, the big account status component, I could put it on multiple pages. And in this app, it's on every page. It's on the weather page, and it's on the home page. Not trying to tell you that that's what you want to do, but why would you want a component that you can reuse for authentication? Maybe you want to put in the upper right-hand corner of every page of your app. You might want to say sign in if the user is not signed in. And you might want to show their name if they are signed in and log out if they are signed in. So by having this all wrapped in one component, that gets you part of the way there. This component's doing way more, but it's for demonstration purposes. So we have my own login account that I created, and my own login account is basically receiving, I'm sorry, which one is this? This is my own login. Yes, my own login. And my own login account, my own login was to allow people to sign in just using their username, which we aren't trying to do here. Today, we are working on Microsoft authentication. So this is the only one we really needed, was this Microsoft, external Microsoft use case. And then I needed the identity endpoint extension for a post, okay? And then I needed this return URL told the provider where to send back the user after they're signed in. The other interesting thing is because I use typeresults.challenge, I am saying to go ahead and sign the user in after they have completed the challenge. All right. So the only other piece of this is a logout. You've seen me log out a few times. I also created an endpoint called -logout. And what does -logout do? It doesn't do much more than use the HTTP context sign out async method. And you have to specify the scheme you're signing out of, because you can, in your application, you can have multiple cookies and multiple schemes. I don't know how practical that really is. And if people have a great example for how that's practical, let me know in the comments on YouTube, especially, or tweet at us on the Dev Talk Show. Let us know. But I think for a work application, I don't see many practical use cases. So that's why I'm signing out the TDTS cookie, which is the cookie we've been using all along. And then all I'm doing is I'm just saying, hey, redirect to just the homepage. Just redirect to the homepage. So let's watch how that all plays out. We say, this is a personal. I need an in private. The reason why I need an in private for all of this is because I'm using an organizational account. I don't want a Microsoft account to get in the way. So if I say you can log in, or I can just log in with Microsoft, and I don't need this breakpoint anymore. And because I've already logged in this particular browser session, it doesn't complain. It says you're authorized, you're logged in as a test user, you're logged in from a Microsoft account. When I click log out, let's go set a breakpoint on log out so we can watch what happens. Set a breakpoint on log out, click log out. And we are on this line of code that's going to sign us out, sign out async. And then also, let's take a look at the state of the cookie real quick. So if I hit F12 and open developer tools, before I sign out, let's do it before I sign out, and I click application, and you can do this in any browser, you're going to see that the cookie is actually called the TDTS cookie, which is cool. It's called the TDTS cookie. So this cookie is keeping us signed in from page to page. I'm going to go ahead and click continue so that I'm through. And now we're back in the browser, and that cookie is gone. Cookie's gone. I am not signed in. Let me sign in using our pretend authentication scheme where all you have to do is provide a name, and it's going to say you're authorized, you're logged in as Chris, you are logged in from our own internal user management, meaning I didn't use the external schemes, Google or Microsoft, and there's the cookie. I am signed in. I can open a new tab, and I'm signed in, right? I can close this, except that, nope, closing it kept it open, which is good. App is still running. I'm going to bring this new browser over here. Let's see if this is persistent. No, it was not persistent. The reason it's not persistent is there is a setting that we can set when we sign some people in to make them persistent. So logged in, but however, if I go to a new tab, it works just fine because persistence within a window is considered that you're still logged in. I click weather. The weather thing, who cares about this? It's showing that we're logged in. I log out. And then the logout did not work, interestingly enough. I think the logout didn't work because I'm signed in. I know why. We don't have logout working from our own internal management. Oh, no, because of the breakpoint. It was the breakpoint. So it should have worked just fine. It should have worked just fine. I was stuck on a breakpoint. All right. Okay. So this code, where is the code? Well, I know a lot of you would love to look at this, and it unfortunately still needs to be added to GitHub. So I'm going to bring up this wonderful project that we've been working on called Blazor Auth from scratch. This particular commit for today's show is not here yet. This will get added shortly. Sorry for people that are watching right now. Let's take a look at our history here. In the history, we say we start a new project, we add an authorized view component, we add authentication to the app and to the homepage, we add the cookie with the same scheme, and we move the login functionality to a component. So the later commits to this will be, how do you get external auth working? And how do you get it wrapped into a component? So that's going to be it for today. I am a little torn on whether we should have written this code together or just walked through it. I think if we'd have written this code together, it might have added another 45 or minutes to an hour to write it line by line. But the keys to your own Blazor authentication from scratch are, you wouldn't pick individual accounts when you're creating a new project. You do need to add authorization and authentication yourself. Now, when we look at the Blazor from scratch project, I'm sorry, not the Blazor from scratch, the Entra ID version that we did earlier, where we used the template. We did this in the template. They do not put a default scheme here. And you may wonder, well, I don't understand. That's because the default scheme here is basically this default scheme right here, right? This right there. In the template, they set a default scheme and a default sign-in scheme. I don't have a problem with that for the template. I understand what the template's trying to do. When working on your own application, I find it a little confusing. It's just a personal opinion that I find it a little confusing. I tend to prefer to be a little more explicit and say the default scheme is going to be this one, TDTS cookie. That way, when you're using your app, there's no question. When you're writing the rest of your app, there's no question what the default scheme is. Then we add a cookie. Okay, so that's a little different from here. Add cookie is something that happens in this magical add identity cookies extension method, which does way more than just, I mean, it does a bunch of stuff. And it's not that I think this is bad. It's just more than I want. I'm not asking in this application for two-factor. I'm not asking for to combine application cookies with external cookies. I'm not asking to do all that. Now, you should be inspired by this, okay? You should be inspired by this when you want to add two-factor yourself, and we will look to do that on a future show. We know there's a ton to authentication, and that just by looking at the template, it can be very difficult. So, great question here from Zig. When do we stream? The Dev Talk Show streams in the mornings. We are on the United States East Coast. So as of right now, it is 9:22 a.m. This is a little bit longer than our normal shows. Typically, we try to start around 7:45 a.m. at that time, and we try to wrap up by 9. I had the ability to go a little bit longer today. We say this is the show before your stand-up meeting, if you happen to be in the same time zone as we are. We do not have a regular schedule yet, and it's only because my co-host Rich Ross, who is a Microsoft employee, and myself, I don't work for Microsoft. I work for a company here in the Philadelphia region, but I work very closely with Microsoft Technologies. So what happens is the two of us try to do as many streams as we can in the morning, but we have not been able to commit to a specific schedule. And we are trying to bring evening shows back with guests, but we haven't been able to commit to that quite yet. I think as summer break is coming along, we may do some of that. So I really love hearing that you were watching today from Iceland. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am so humbled to hear about our global audience, and I hope that we have helped you get on the path to building authentication in Blazor, because authentication in Razor pages was kind of straightforward. You could scaffold the pages. All the stuff that you got in the template, you didn't have to care too much about. You just scaffold the pages you wanted and everything was fine. But the Blazor template gives you more than you might want. And I think learning about how authentication and authorization really work under the covers can help you to understand how you want to move forward. So there will not be a show the rest of this week, only because I already know Rich is on a business trip, I believe. And I already know that I have morning meetings that will get in the way of Thursday and Friday. But the plan is to be back next Monday morning with a show here. And we will probably be diving into Blazor components, which is not the same thing as authentication, just talking strictly about components. You saw today that we used features of components, such as some of the features that we're using here are cascading parameters, supplying parameters from forms. And I also want to stress that today everything was done using the server side rendering. It works pretty well with Blazor server as well. It will be interesting when we move into Blazor WebAssembly, because in Blazor WebAssembly, you have to do some fancy techniques so that the client goes back to a server with the information to log in, and the server has to persist that somehow to the client, knowing that clients don't necessarily have to remain connected to servers. That's the whole point of online apps. And to the point about scheduling in YouTube, what we are trying to do is although it's been very difficult this week for me, is when we know we're going to have a show, we're trying to put that show up at YouTube in the scheduled to come. And we'll see if we can get that done for Monday. But appreciate all the comments, appreciate everybody that joined today. We had a nice audience today, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We can walk through this. We might provide a companion video to walk through this line by line, but this was live today, and we will see all of you next time on the Dev Talk Show.